Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today regarding B2B SaaS pricing in a dynamic market. And indeed, the market is dynamic, or in other words, it is very challenging. And think about it. Think about the economic slowdown of the past few years due to COVID initially, but then afterwards, the energy crisis and, of course, the war. And think about the elevated inflation rates, things that we're still struggling with even as we speak today. And of course, think about the competition, especially in the technology market. You have many competitors, new competitors entering the market. And especially in fields like generative AI, this happens when you have tens of new competitors entering the market each and every week. It's very intense and it's highly competitive. And finally, think about your products and also your competitors' products, how quickly they evolve, and also customers evolve as well. If you think all about these things and bring all these together, you have what? You have an explosive mix, which makes the pricing decision-making even more difficult and more complex than ever before. But the good news is that there are ways that you can address all these challenges. And together with Nihit, we are going to present some of the most advanced AI tools, but also pricing methods that you can use in order to stay ahead of your competitors in this fast-paced and quickly changing and very challenging market. But now let's say a couple of things about us and our relation with pricing. I'm George Boretos, and I'm the founder and CEO of FutureUp. And I have almost 30 years of professional experience in B2B software, enterprise software. And a large part of my professional life, I've been dealing with AI, but also with pricing. And I know firsthand from my personal experience how difficult and challenging, but also very important, pricing can be, and how important and valuable can be to apply AI in pricing and especially in price optimization. And this is exactly what we do in FutureUp. We help B2B enterprises improve or optimize their pricing and also improve their profitability and grow faster in a fast-paced and challenging marketplace. So I'm handing over to Nihit to also present himself, his company, and start with the first part of our webinar and presentation. Nihit, you have the stage.
Thank you, George. My name is Nihit Ningthojam, and I'm founder of Pricing Strat. Pricing Strat specifically helps B2B SaaS companies realize their monetization potential. We typically leverage the entire range of pricing tools from machine learning / AI to research-based techniques such as conjoint analysis in order to optimize pricing and packaging. Couple of logistics. This webinar is recorded and we'll share with you the recording afterwards. Our presentation will last approximately 45 minutes and it will be followed by a Q&A session. So feel free to use the Q&A button throughout the presentation to ask any question. We'll attempt to those questions at the end. What we'll cover today, number one, the market today and what impact it has on SaaS pricing. Number two, we'll go into the basics of crafting SaaS pricing strategy. Number three, we'll look into how we can leverage AI to optimize pricing. Number four, we'll also look into how we can test our pricing decisions before actually implementing them. Number five, we'll look into some emerging novel pricing tools such as neuropricing, followed by key takeaways and Q&A session. So before we start our content, we have designed a poll to gauge the pricing challenges that we are facing today. So I'm going to launch the poll and we'll wait for your answer. I'm sharing the results and wow, so we have two clear winners: inflation, number one, number two, competitive landscape. So it's not very surprising at all. We also launched this poll with our network ahead of this session, and I'm going to share the results. So the top three results that we got are number one, inflation, number two, competition, same as the poll that we have that we saw right now, followed by packaging. So we'll try to cover these major challenges today in our session today. So the market today, the chart on the left-hand side shows a persistent inflation since 2022. Even though it's gradually decreasing, it's still the inflation rate is higher than the pre-pandemic era. And then on the other hand, the graph on the right-hand side shows a slowing economy. So what does it mean for us, for the SaaS player? So on one hand, the inflation and cost increase is pressurizing the SaaS players to increase the price. And on the flip side, the economic slowdown and uncertainty in the market are constraining the budget of the SaaS customers, and hence pressurizing the SaaS players to decrease their price. So it creates a confusion. And so the key question for us is, what should we do? Should we increase the price? Should we decrease the price? Or should we keep the price at the same level? The answer to these questions actually lie in data, and we should turn into proven scientific approaches to pricing in order to answer these questions. And this is exactly what we'll cover today. So what is a SaaS pricing strategy? If we break down a SaaS pricing strategy, there are three key components. Number one, the pricing metric. Number two, the price level. And number three, the packaging. So as an example, I've highlighted the pricing and packaging of Zoom on the right-hand side. So their pricing metric is per year per user. Their price levels are $0, $149, $199, and they have three packages: basic, pro, business. So if we scientifically optimize and define these three components, then we have crafted a solid pricing strategy which is ready to be implemented. I'll go to these three components one by one. So the first component is definition of the pricing metric. So what are the possible range of pricing metrics? I've grouped them and elaborated them here. The list is not exhaustive, but we have four groups here. And as we go from left to right-hand side, the value alignment of these pricing metrics with customers' value would increase. So the first group is a fixed fee model, the pricing model that we used to use when we have a lot of desktop software. For example, it's price per platform, price per solution, price per module, etc. And then the second group is per user pricing metric. So this was invented during the SaaS era. For example, price per user, price per name user, price per active user, etc. And then we have the emerging group of pricing metric, which is per user basis. Here, the example would be per report, per download, per any predefined action or process, for example, per click, per calculation, etc. And then finally, we have per outcome basis pricing metrics. So it's like per sales, per revenue generated, per dollar saved. Could be on the basis of any quantifiable objective that the SaaS product serves. For example, if a SaaS product helps companies recruit people, then the metric could be per hire, for example. So we have these range of possible pricing metrics, and the key question for us is, which one should we use? In order to answer that, I would suggest 6 key criteria. Criteria number one, value alignment. So is the pricing metric aligned with the value created for the customers? The second criteria, is it scalable? Does the pricing metric allow you to grow as your customers grow? Number 3, does the pricing metric promote usage? So Why is it important? Because there are some very interesting pricing metrics, very well aligned with value, but then it scares the customers to use the product. In this case, it would backfire. Number 4 is a pricing metric measurable. Can we actually put a meter to measure the pricing metric? Number 5, is it auditable? Once we measure it, for example, at the server of your customers, can we actually go and audit it? So that's a very important criteria. And the last criteria is it predictable? Can your customers actually predict their annual bill? If not, if it's very uncertain, then they might be reluctant to adopt the product. So generally, we first brainstorm all the possible range of pricing metrics, and then use this 6 criteria to choose the right one. On the top of the pricing metric, we can use fencing metric to monetize further, to monetize the heavy users, the outliers. For example, if price per user is the pricing metric of Zoom, then we can use, for example, cloud storage as a fencing metric. They have like 5 GB included, 5 GB of cloud storage included in the business package. So how we would use this fencing metric is that on the top of, if the customers want to use more than 5 GB, then we would monetize X dollar per GB. This is a very underused concept, so we can definitely leverage fencing metric to monetize further. The second component is price optimization. On this page, I have laid out all the possible available sources of information and the pricing tools associated with them, the tools that we can use to process these data into meaningful pricing strategy. We have two types of data. Number 1, historical or present data. Number 2, prospective data, the futuristic data. The tools that we can use to process the historical data are, number 1, basic analytics. So these are the analysis that we can do on Excel to plot the demand curve. So at each price point, what would be the volume? And it would give an elasticity curve. It is a very preliminary method, and it gives some directional insights, but it is quite flawed in the sense that on the top of price, other factors such as seasonality, customers' reactions, promotions would also affect the volume, right? So we need to isolate the impact of these other factors. In order to do so, we would turn into tool number 2, advanced analytics, which includes AI/machine learning. This tool typically allows us to isolate the impact of price on volume. George will cover this tool in detail in the second half. The third and fourth tool we have are related to value estimation. In these techniques, we typically identify the value drivers and then quantitatively benchmark against the competitors across all these value drivers and accordingly adjust the price. Then we have the fifth tool, value chain analysis. Generally, it's not relevant for SaaS players unless like we have a very long value chain like B2B to B2 SaaS. In this case, we would analyze each step of the value chain, optimize the price at each level, and then come up with the final price. The tools that we can use to process the prospective data are, number 1, semi-quantitative expert judgment. So it is technique in which we typically interview experts, internal experts from sales team or external experts from the industry, and gauge the impact of price change on volume. We typically ask questions such as, if we increase the price by X%, how would the volume evolve? and we collate these information together and draw the demand curve. The second tool we have is experiment. For example, A/B test pilots, in which we typically launch a product for a significant amount of time along which we change the product features and price, and then see the impact on the volume. And finally, we have a large group of tools related to customer research in which we directly ask the customers. The first group of tools is called direct questioning technique, in which we directly ask the customers how much they are willing to pay. This gives a very useful insight, but it's generally biased in the sense that the customers know that we are talking about the price, so they tend to give a biased response. In order to nullify the bias, we have two solutions. Number one, we can ask the same set of questions for a known product with known optimum price to then nullify the bias. Or secondly, we can turn into the indirect questioning techniques, which is in the middle, the second groups, in which we show the customers different options of products or packages along with the price and ask them to choose. I've laid out three of them, like brand price trade-off, monadic price test, and conjoint analysis. Of which generally conjoint analysis is the gold standard when it comes to customer research, especially when we want to optimize the pricing and packaging together, or we want to gauge the willingness to pay for a new product which has never been tested or launched in the market, or to gauge the value of new features which has been never tested in the market. And how it works is we break down the product into each features, attribute components, and then we force the customers to trade off between features and price. So we typically show them different options of products covering our own products, competitive products, also futuristic packages, and then ask them to choose their preferred choice multiple times, covering all different combinations. And then finally, we reverse engineer their responses using advanced analytics such as hierarchical Bayesian regression. Then it will give the actual nonlinear demand curve, which we then use to optimize the pricing and packaging. Then finally, we have a novel emerging pricing tool, research tool called neuropricing, where we actually use electrodes on the brain of our prospects and then gauge their willingness to pay. George will cover this tool in the second half as well. So we have this whole range of possible pricing tools. The key question for us is, which one should we use? It's quite challenging to choose the right one. In order to do so, I've laid out 4 key criteria that we need to consider. Number one, the pricing accuracy. That's the most important one. Number two, additional outputs. What additional outputs you can get on the top of pricing optimization? For example, package optimization, portfolio optimization, what if analysis, such as what if competitors launch a new package, new product, or what if they increase or decrease their price? Then we have cost, the cost to run these analysis. And finally, we have time, the time to run this analysis. I'm not going to go through the comparisons, the benchmarks of all these tools across these 4 criteria, but the key takeaway from this table is that the tool that we need to have very quick directional answer would be very different from the tool that we need to use when we want a more accurate answer and when we have like budget and time. Or like the tool that we need to use when we want to optimize pricing and packaging together would be different, right? Typically, if my project is involves optimization of just the price, then I would turn into advanced analytics, including which involves machine learning. If like we have sufficient data, sufficient number of transactions, as well as if we have budget and time. And if the project involves packaging and pricing together, or like it involves testing a totally new product which has never been tested, or new features, then I would turn into conjoint analysis. And in more than 50% of my projects, I would use both conjoint analysis and machine learning together to craft a solid pricing strategy. You would have this table with you with our recording, so you can use this table to choose the right pricing tool for your objectives. We have covered how to define the pricing metric, how to optimize the price, and finally, we'll now cover how to optimize the packaging. On this page, I've laid out a very simple yet very powerful framework that we can use to optimize our packaging. We have X and Y axis. On X axis, we have demand of the features, and on Y axis, we have willingness to pay for the features. And we would plot all the features on this XY plane and then divide them into 4 quadrants. In the first quadrant, we have features with high demand but low willingness to pay. These are the features which we would include in the basic package or the free package. We would call them core features. In the second quadrant, we have features with high demand and high willingness to pay. And these are the features that we use to differentiate between basic and premium packages. And we'll call them gold features. And in the third quadrant, we have features with low demand, but the customers who need these features are willing to pay a lot. And we would not include these features in the package itself, but we would sell them separately as add-ons. And finally, we have features with low demand and low willingness to pay. And these are the features we don't actually need. They are unnecessarily increasing the complexity and cost. If it is technically feasible and it makes business sense, then like we should consider removing them. On the top of this basic framework, we can also use some advanced analytics to optimize the packaging to increase the accuracy. I'm presenting 3 of them. The first technique is called cluster analysis, like K-means. In a more business-friendly term, it's called segmentation. We would use usage data and needs data of the customers to group the customers into different segments. And for each segment, we then try to create packages based on their needs and usage. The second technique we have is principal component analysis. Here again, we'll use the usage data and the needs data to cluster the features. We typically use this technique when we want to create multiple modules which are independent to each other. So instead of like tiering the packages, right? And the third technique that we have is conjoint analysis, which I've described earlier. I'll quickly show how the results of conjoint analysis look like. This interface typically have 4 components. The first component is the packaging area where we would define the packages of our SaaS product. The second component is the impact area where we would see the impact of our packaging on share of customers or share of users in terms of probability, on revenue index, on margin, etc. And then on the right-hand side, we have the third component, which is a share of our product against the players, the competitors in the market. We have defined their packages at the back end. And then the fourth component is a segmentation area where we can actually select the segments and then analyze, do the optimization per segment. The 3 key advantages of using conjoint analysis are: number 1, it allows us to do hyper optimization of the packaging and pricing. We can very efficiently try all the possible combinations of the features and prices and decide, make our packaging and pricing decision. An example would be like if we start decreasing the price of the profile level 2, we will know at which price point we start to cannibalize profile level 3 and start drawing customers from more profitable packages. Another counter example would be like if we start optimizing feature 5 of the profile level 2, it will show at which price point it creates a more easy upselling path by pulling customers from the less profitable profile level 1, right? So it allows hyper optimization. The second key advantage is it allows us to optimize number of packages. First, we'll optimize, for example, like 3 system of packages. Then we would then include a 4th one here and then optimize the 4 packaging system, and then see what is then incremental margin, right? And then trade it off with the increasing operational complexity of adding a 4th tier, and then decide to make a business decision on that. We can similarly add a 5th one and do the optimization. And the final, the third advantage of using conjoint analysis is it allows us to do what-if analysis. For example, what if the competitors launch a new product or a new package? What if there's a new competition into the market? What if the competitor increase or decrease the price, for example? And that's conjoint analysis. And with that, I'll hand over to George for the second part of the presentation.
So Nihit talked about all these great pricing methods, and now we'll talk about AI and how this can be applied and used, and all the value and benefit that comes out of it in pricing, and especially in price optimization. We remember all the challenges that we are facing today at the country level: economic slowdown, inflation rates, things like that. At the market level, we have competitors entering the market all of the time, especially in technology markets, and all the things about the evolution of customers and products. All this makes pricing very, very difficult, and predictive AI can help on that. Help on what? Especially in optimizing pricing, and also in understanding or estimating the impact of all these factors, all these changes at the market level or the country level, for instance, what this means for our sales, for our pricing, for everything that we do, for us, the market, but also for our competitors. And also, it can help us to create some scenarios about the market, our sales, about everything. But the key question here is, why do we need something else? And why can't we use the existing methods that we have been using for such a long time quite successfully? Because let's admit it, we have come a long way from cost plus to value-based pricing or to competition-based pricing. And on top of that, most of the pricing professionals today have at least some access to some base statistical methods. I mean, we all estimate and calculate price elasticity, and we use it all of the time with great results. And most of us have the knowledge to fit a base demand curve to some pricing data, for instance, a linear model or something like that. So why can't we use all these models to do all these great things that I described before? For 2 reasons, mainly. First of all, these models and these approaches, these methods are great, but usually they work better in a relatively stable environment. And this is exactly what we don't have today. We live in a volatile market, and these models don't work very well there. And second, we need to be able to simulate and to create alternative outcomes for the future, alternative scenarios. And why is that? Because one thing we learned through all these years of turbulence with COVID, with energy crisis, war, inflation, and all these things is that you can never be 100% sure that whatever you have predicted or planned for the future will stay exactly the same. It will be somewhat or completely different, so you have to plan. You have to create contingency plans and plan for alternative outcomes. In this case, that means that you do need some simulation, you do need some scenario planning, and most of these methods have limited or no simulation capabilities at all. So for all these reasons, we need something more, and this something more is predictive AI and can help us optimize our pricing and do many other things under uncertain times like the times that we live right now. But let's now see exactly how predictive AI does all these things. And before we see how predictive AI works, let's see how real business life works. And first of all, let's see how price affects sales performance. In order to do that, we'll use a simple example. It's not a real example, it's a fictitious one. And actually, I will use exactly what Nihit mentioned before in his presentation, the Zoom subscriptions example. And these are the current Zoom subscriptions. I'm pretty sure that everybody is aware of Zoom. You have used it. We actually use it right now. We're using Zoom webinars. And in this fictitious example, we have a business owner who has 100 people, 100 employees working in his company, and he wants to buy some Zoom subscriptions for his users in order to fulfill their day-to-day conferencing, video conferencing needs. So the first thing that he would do, and this is what we all do when we want to purchase something, is examine, not prices, first of all, examine all the different packs offered by Zoom and all their specifications, and see what pack is best for the different types of users living within his company. In this case, we have two types of users. First of all, 60 out of the 100 are what we call customer-facing users, people working in support, for instance, or in sales, and they have daily calls with many customers, and they want more out of their Zoom subscription. So for them, he has decided to purchase 60 business packs. And for the remaining 40 employees that don't have so many needs for video conferencing with customers or anyone else, so he decides that the Pro subscription would suffice. But so far, what this business owner has done is identified ideally what he would like to have for his people as far as Zoom subscriptions is concerned. But he didn't see the prices. But what happens afterwards? We face reality and we see exactly the cost that we will have to pay, the price that we will have to pay in order to fulfill our ideal needs. And what happened in this fictitious, again, example, but it happens in real life, it happens to you and me and everyone, is that in the first case, still the business owner decides to purchase 60 business subscriptions out of the 60. That's 100% conversion rate. And why? Because these guys really want to have the most out of Zoom because they really need the interaction, the online interaction with the customer. But for the remaining 40 employees, it turns out that it's more a nice to have than a mandatory and elastic need. So in this case, he decides to just purchase 10 Pro subscription packs out of 40. So in the first case, we have a 100% probability to buy or conversion rate. In the second case, we have only 25, 10 out of 40 probability to buy. And this is what happens with each and every customer or potential customer that we have. So if you aggregate that to all your potential customers, you get the overall opportunity size. So in this case is the total number of subscriptions that ideally all your potential customers will buy. And then you have your average probability to buy this overall opportunity, overall number of subscription at each and every different price level. And if you combine your probability to buy with the opportunity size, you get your demand. And if you multiply with your price, you get your sales. It's as simple as that. And I guess it makes sense. Well, it's exactly what AI, predictive AI, is doing. Because at its core, at its most basic form, it's a demand model. So it's a model that takes data, pricing data, sales data, either historical or prospective data from the company or the market. And based on that, it fits a demand curve. And it extrapolates for all the prices that were not included in the sample that we use for our training. And based on that, you have the demand curve. And afterwards, you have what? You have your probability to buy, your customers, to buy your product or your offering at each and every price level. As simple as that. Does it work? Yes, it does. Is it useful for all cases? Well, not for all cases, but for many cases, this is more than enough, and we can do wonders with these base demand models. However, in many cases, and especially in our times where many things change, not just prices, we need something more. And why is that? Because there are so many other factors that affect our sales performance apart from price. For instance, let's see a couple of examples at different levels. At the country level, imagine that you have a country in recession. That means that the spending capacity of each and every business person and business within the country is decreasing. That means that I have less money to spend. And that means that even if prices, all prices stay the same, I will be less probable to buy anything. So my probability to buy will decrease. At a different level, if the market is expanding for any reason at all, then my opportunity size will expand as well, irrespective of the price levels. And the same with product, the actual product that I'm selling, its feature set, specifications, the product quality or perceived product quality, anything that can make my product less or more attractive, obviously, it will affect eventually the probability for this product to be chosen over my competitors. And of course, the same for customers. We all have heard of something called product market fit. That means that some customers are best fit for some products and vice versa. And that will definitely affect the type of customer I mean, and the customer segment that this customer comes from will definitely affect also the probability to win this customer plus the opportunity size. I'm pretty sure that all these are well known and you have many examples that you witness yourself in your business, in your market, in your country, in whatever you are operating your business. But the important thing is what we can do or what we do with predictive AI afterwards to incorporate all these factors as well. Well, the simplest of things, we build another layer, the augmented demand model, on top of the demand model, which captures what? Price elasticity, the price dynamics. On top of that, we build another model which captures all the remaining stuff, the country dynamics, the market dynamics, anything else. But it's a clever one because it has econometrics inside, economic theory, business logic. So it understands that inflation, for instance, works differently than GDP or GDP growth. They affect obviously growth, they affect obviously your sales performance or your probability to buy, but with a different way. And it has all this incorporated. And what it eventually does, I'm talking about the augmented demand model, it shifts the demand curve. It shifts the demand curve either upwards, in case you have some of these factors affecting positively the market. For instance, the country's economy is expanding or the market where you operate is expanding, or downwards in the case where you have some things negatively affecting the market. For instance, you have competitors, the market or yourself, obviously, or your company. For instance, where you have new competitors entering the market or competitors lowering their prices. After we have all this in place and this augmented model on top of the demand model in place, we can do all sorts of great things. Because now we can predict our sales performance, we can predict our penetration level, our competitors' performance, market trends, things like that, based on all the market, country, and other circumstances, plus pricing on top of that. And based on that, also we can do some optimization. So we can suggest, find, identify, and suggest optimum prices to maximize what? Our revenue, for instance, our penetration level. Or it could be our profitability, assuming you have cost information as well, or any other KPI that is an objective for any specific company. Now, these are just some examples of the things that we can do. We can answer all these sort of questions, and these are important questions, like what should be my price cross countries, for instance, or what should I do if inflation rises or my competitors are differentiating, changing their prices, and so on and so forth. Now, what we did so far is we set up the foundation of a good predictive AI model. It should have business logic embedded, it should have econometrics and economic logic embedded. It should understand as a model, as a predictive model, exactly how the economy is working, how business is performed in real life. And this is something that we definitely do. It's not just a mathematical formulation. It has business, economy, all embedded within the model. But would this suffice? Well, we should have this at least, but eventually every decent predictive model should work in practice and create value for the customer. So it's important to be able to test the predictive power of any model plus the actual decision that you make and if it created value for your company or not. And there are many ways to do that, more than one. We will just explain here a couple, three actually, ways that are important and are used in the market, and they can be used before the launch of your new pricing policy or after its launch. So let's start for the first one. The first one is something that we use to test the predictive power of the model, and this should be done before the actual launch of your new pricing policy. And this is something that for anyone who knows data science and how it works, it's common. We use it all of the time. It's called in and out of sample testing. And I will explain it with a simple example. Let's say that we want to fit a demand curve. So to understand the probability to buy at each and every price level. In order to do so, we have 2 years of pricing and sales data. Instead of using all the data for training our model, we use 1.5 years. And we leave out of the sample, this is why it's called in and out of sample testing, we leave the last half year. So we train the model with the initial 1.5 years, we create the demand curve, and then we compare what we created this way, what we generated this way with our predictive AI model against the actual data that we left out of sample, the last half year. If the actual data with the predictions of the predictive model are very close, we have a great model with great predictive power. If not, then there is something wrong there, and we need to refine the model, possibly put in some additional factors, market factors that we left out, the augmented market model that I mentioned before, in order to refine it, test it again until we're satisfied that the estimates are great. But then what happens when we are successful and we have a great predictive model, so we can predict prices, the demand curve, all this stuff, so we can optimize our price, theoretically. So we have a new pricing policy, which is theoretically optimized. But how can we test if this is really the case? Well, we can do what we call price experiments, or you may know it as A/B testing. Practically speaking, it's very simple. It's not simple to do it, but it's very simple conceptually. You have a control, let's say, group of customers where you apply your previous pricing policy, your existing pricing policy, and another group, similar group, where you apply your new pricing policy for 1 month, 2 months, for whatever time you want. And based on that, you test the results. If you see a performance enhancement in the second group with the new pricing policy, then you have a winner. You are doing something right. If not, obviously there is something wrong, and you need to rethink your policy, your model, your something, and then test again until you are satisfied. And last but not least, it's something that we can do after the launch, obviously, of our new pricing policy. In order to see if we improved our performance, we need to monitor it. So, I mean, it's the most common sense thing to do, and we should obviously do it. And it's easy to do it in most cases. If you target to improve with your new pricing model a certain KPI, it could be your revenue and your growth. It could be your conversion rates. It could be a number of things. Then you should monitor if you did indeed improve it. If not, then again, there is something wrong. If yes, then obviously everything looks great and you have actual value created within your company. So that's the great thing, that we have many ways to actually test if the predictive model is great, and also if the value created out of it is great as well and within my expectations, the company's expectations. Now, this is an example to illustrate how this works in real life. This is an actual customer example, and it's from the mobile application market. So this customer has multiple mobile applications within app purchases. So he has many different SKUs. And these SKUs on mobile application are being sold through multiple different countries, tens of different countries, with different potential. It's in every country. So the challenge is what? That each and every SKU has a different price, obviously, but the same SKU has the same price, not different prices for different countries. And obviously this doesn't make any sense because we have different capacities, capabilities, potential, income, spending income capacity, and all these things between the different countries. So the customer asked for a price proposal, a price suggestion to optimize revenues and everything within each and every country. Now, what we did, using the predictive AI model, both the augmented and the base demand model that I described before, which is the predictive AI model that we are using in Future App, What we did is that we took the model, the predictive model, we took into consideration different data at the country level, GDP growth, at the market level, mobile penetration, and so on and so forth, plus obviously pricing, sales, product, and customer data that we have from the customer. And based on that, we created some price suggestions. And those were highly differentiated per country. In some cases, against the flat price strategy base price. In some cases, in some countries, the price was heavily discounted. In some other cases, it was increased considerably. When we applied that and we did A/B testing with a control group with a previous flat price strategy across countries, and the next group with differentiated price based on our models, the result was really amazing because they almost doubled the revenue and almost tripled the conversion rates. This is just an indication of how strong and important and valuable AI can be when it's applied in its augmented form, and not just its simple form, in a market that is changing considerably. Now, there are other approaches that we can use apart from AI. We will just glance through this because each and every one of these would be a webinar. Actually, for the neuropricing, we are planning another webinar. We'll let you know afterwards. Let's start with neuropricing. What is neuropricing? What's the problem that it's trying to solve? The problem is, let's say, as an example, you have a predictive AI case. You want to feed in some input data for your predictive AI model to train it. You don't have historical data, so you use prospective data, i.e. data coming from customers, interviews, things like that. But the question is, do the customers say exactly what they have in mind? So we get valuable and honest information as input for a predictive model or not? Well, in most cases, the answer will be not entirely, because there are hidden agendas, because the customer has an agenda and a benefit to lower the price. So they have a bias towards lower prices. With neuropricing, we can overcome this obstacle. How? Don't ask me about the science. There are wiser and cleverer people who know the science, but I understand the mechanics of it. And the mechanics of it is that instead of just asking questions about prices and everything, we get the subjects, i.e. the customers or the partners or anyone, in a controlled laboratory environment where we perform an experiment. We wired everyone with electrodes on the heads and we measure response times, but also, I guess, brainwaves or something. And based on that, we interpret the answer that came from the customer to what they really thought. And this is exactly what happens. Instead, in the example that I mentioned before, of having a predictive AI model with input exactly the response of the customer, now you have as input the neuropricing filter response of the customer, which is closer to the truth and what the customer have in their minds. And this works in practice and creates tremendous benefits, as I guess you can think and you can imagine. There are alternative ways to do that through online systems that measure just response times with pros and cons in case you don't want the hassle of the laboratory environment. Very quickly, because I want to leave at least 6-7 minutes for some questions, there are other methods that you can use, like outcome-based pricing. Great for the customer because they pay when they receive certain results, but you need to be certain that you will deliver, otherwise you won't get paid. Dynamic pricing, be careful in the B2B environment. This is practically changing through AI, automation, continuously your prices. It works well for Amazon and B2C. For B2B, it's a bit tricky to change your prices too frequently, so be aware of that. Participative pricing, we've seen that is where the customer practically charges what they want, pays what they want, what they feel is right. In some manifestations, this is just donations for premium, for freemium, for instance, software. But a better example, I think, is auctions, where you have the customers competing for, let's say, a fixed number of subscriptions with a fixed minimum and maximum price. But again, you need to think if this is the right tool for you. Just to summarize everything extremely quickly, because again, I want to have some time for questions. What we've seen today is, first of all, what we know. the market is changing, is very challenging, and pricing is becoming more complex and more difficult. And definitely we need sophisticated ways and tools to inform our pricing decision. And we've seen, he presented that very thoroughly, that there are numerous different advanced pricing methods that we can use, for instance, to optimize our packaging and pricing. But also on top of that, we have also predictive AI methods that can help us optimize pricing and also create various scenarios about the future. And we can use all these or some of these methods and tools in order to optimize pricing, in order to accelerate our profitability and also grow faster in a fast-paced and very challenging marketplace, especially exactly the marketplace where we live in right now. So let's go and start answering some questions. I can see that you have put in some over here. So let me see. What is the targeted group for B2B SaaS pricing? Customers with commodity products, innovative products, complete price transparency per feature, volume isn't available for every industry. Okay, so I don't know, do you want to take that or me taking that?
Yeah, I can take that. So if
okay, that's great.
So if we don't have price transparency, we don't have data, then we should turn into research, right? In customer research, then the key question is what should be the target customers that we need to recruit in our research. That actually depends. That there could be two scenarios. One scenario in which the SaaS company already know, their marketing team already know their target customers, then we use those criteria like the size, the industry, if they've ever used a specific product in the past, etc., and who are the key decision makers. We use all these criteria and then recruit them. The second scenario is a more exploratory approach in which we actually don't know our target customers. So we then try to include different personas of customers, profiles of customers, and then explore the gaps in the market, and then finally define our target customer based on that.
Okay, thanks, Nihit. So let's go for another question. Nihit, I guess that's for you as well. What's the scope of application of pricing methods usually?
So like I've already covered, but like just to summarize, like we can optimize price. Obviously, we can optimize packaging along with price. Number three, we can do what if analysis, like what if competitors launch a new product, a new package, or what if they increase their or decrease their price? What should be our reaction? Also, lastly, then we can also test like new features, gauge the value of new features on new products that we have never been tested earlier.
Okay. Give us some good example of AI applications in pricing. Let me take this one, Nihit, because it's about AI. There are numerous applications, endless applications, but I would say in our recent times, and based on the poll that we did together, we had a previous session and also a survey that we did, it seems that the most important challenge right now is to understand what's the impact of market or a different country indicators and dynamics into your pricing. So that's inflation, that's exchange rates, that's market growth, that's competitive pricing, that's all this stuff. So my guess is that the best possible AI application, not the only one, the best possible, and some good examples of AI applications is to have something, a model, a system, I don't know, whatever, a solution, that gives you an estimate of the impact on your sales performance when something changes from the market. So what happens with your sales performance if your competitor lowers or increases prices? Or when inflation is increasing or decreasing? Or when the GDP is growing or decreasing, or the spending capacity, or whatever. Because if you have that, then you can start creating scenarios, then you can start optimizing your pricing and everything else. Apart from that, there are numerous other scenarios that I can think of, but I think this is one of the best candidates that I could think of. Okay, another one that I see here, and I think that we only have time for just one question, nothing more. Okay, what is the more important to predict, the size of the market, or how probable it is to buy something, a product? So I guess we're referring to the slide where I had the probability to buy and the opportunity size, where you can make predictions about both things. What's the most important? I would say that it depends on where you live in, the market that you are in, and what you want to achieve, what you want to do. So if you are in a relatively stable or predictable market, where you know the size of the market more or less, or you can predict it relatively safe, then the most important thing is that you predict your probability that you will be chosen within a very safeguarded or well-known market. But when you have factors that affect everything, not just the probability to buy, but also the market size as well, for instance, the market is expanding for some reason or declining for some reason, decreasing for some reason, then in this case, it's equally important to also understand what is the impact on the opportunity size as well. So it's not the one or the other, it's what you know well, because both are in place to determine eventually and define your sales performance. But if you know one and you are missing the other, then this is where you should apply your analysis, your data processing, your AI, your whatever. If you are missing both, or you think that something changed and everything will be changed, then you need both as well. And with that, I think that we reached the end of our today's webinar. And the only thing left is to thank you all for your attendance. It's been great. I hope that you liked what you heard and you are as excited as we are about all these new or existing pricing methods and AI, predictive AI models. And of course, if you find something that you didn't understand or something that you are interested or something that you want to learn more, don't hesitate to send us an email and we'll get back and we can jump on a call and discuss. So thanks everyone, and hope to see you soon in some other webinars that we will do in the near future. Thank you. Bye-bye everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye everyone.